So I will be today speaking to you about mainly in specific how we can optimize our database access in Django. So that will be the topic for today. So I'll just start presenting. Let me know if you guys can see my screen, and we can start. I hope I'm audible as well, and it's not an issue. Yeah. Okay. Great. So yeah, this is the presentation for GeekyAnts, and so today we talk about database access optimization the Django way. So like why we need to optimize our database access. It's pretty obvious as as we're building products, software products, we have to build it in the most optimized way, and every most of our every operation in our code bases involve interacting with the database. So when that happens, optimization does not happen only on the code we write, but also how we access our database and how we read and write via them. So as we know, Django ORM is already very powerful. It offers you a lot of out-of-the-box operations that propels the way you work with your databases. So it also gives you small things here and there that makes you work with the databases more efficiently. So we'll be speaking about that. So I want to give a skeleton of the things that we'll be speaking about today. So first thing is it's going to be very specific about how about the database optimization in specifically with respect to Django. So there is not going to be any basic stuff about Django. There will not be any how to start your Django application, how to configure your code base or API. There's not going to be anything of that sort. So if you're already aware of all these things, this is a really good session because this will have every small things here and there that you can do to make your code base better and potentially save millions of dollars with respect to the when it comes to scale. So that's the presentation about. So first, so the presentation is essentially going to be kind of split into two parts. So first one will be understanding how query sets work, how the Django ORM operates with query sets, and second part is how we can optimize it. So when we understand how our query sets are being evaluated, how it is being, what is the cost at which it runs, we will be in a better position to optimize it. So that will be the skeleton of the presentation. So right, okay. So I'm sorry, it's going to be a little not very interesting because it doesn't have memes. It's going to be hardcore code snippets, and we talk about what is happening where. So yeah, first thing first, you have to always understand what your query set is doing. So to understand what a query set is doing, you can use the function explain. It just gives you what is the cost of your operation and of the operation that you're performing on the database with the ORM. So here is a small example of what I'm talking about. So here we can see that we have used the explain function on this filter of the query set. So it's saying sequential scan on this blog object, and the cost of it is this much, and it scanned 10 rows to find this object, and the total width of the query set was 12. So this is a good example, right? So because every time you're getting the cost of your operation, you'll be able to see how much efficient your query set is. So also explain gives you a lot of other things we'll be seeing further. So it will give you the time at which it evaluated this particular query set as well. So that is the first thing that you have to do. Use explain to find out how your query set is performing. And once you do that, once you get the information of what your query set is doing, now you start optimizing it. So for what do you optimize your database access? So you either optimize it for speed or for memory, right? So with these two things, what are the things that Django offers out of the box that you can use to to optimize it with respect to speed and memory? We will be looking at it further. So off we go. So understanding query set evaluation, right? So query sets are lazy. They don't do work unless they're it's absolutely necessary for them to do it. So in this small code example, code snippet over here, we see that um, we are performing three query sets. The first one being a filter operation. The second one also being a filter operation. Third one being an exclude operation with respect to one of the fields on the model. So here, when the last statement is a print statement, the query set is not evaluated or the SQL queries does not run on the database unless and until it encounters this print object, print statement. So what Django does is, okay, the everything is fine, the syntax is all good, we are good to compile. First statement, second statement, third statement. When it comes to the fourth one, it actually says that, okay, I need to give you all this information now. So I'm going to go back and do all of my work and then give you that statement, give you the data that you require. So the execution of your SQL queries is happening only on the fourth statement. So query sets are pretty lazy, and this is a good example for the same. Now moving on. So when are query sets evaluated? So you can see in this particular code snippet, as I said earlier, right, it does not do the required work until and unless we ask for it. So here in this for loop statement, entry.objects.all, it's itself a query set performing the SQL operation. Now, whenever it encounters print e.headline, right, only then are you going to get the data. Before that, nothing. It's just going to say, okay, dude, I'm going to give it to you later whenever you ask. So that's how query sets work. And so next thing is how we hold the how the data is held in the held in the query set, right? So what happens when we so in the first code snippet, you're able to see that we are performing two ORM operations saying entry.objects.all. So entry.objects.all. This is fine. Two SQL operations. We get our data and then we go ahead with our business logic. But what you have to do over here is, I mean, all of us do that, right? Even I do this. So whenever I want to perform my logic, I just get the data and then I start going ahead. But we should not be doing this. Instead, we should optimize it. So example, we are querying the database for the same object, for the same data. Instead, what you can do is a very simple thing, right? You can hold the data in another variable, use that variable for your further operations. This is one of the simplest things that you can do to save your database cost, right? Next thing, when are query sets not cached? So I was saying earlier, right? So whenever we ask for the data, then only the query is evaluated and the query set gives you the data. So here, on the same lines, on the same argument, in this code snippet, you can see that we have some data on the query set. I mean, which is obviously not yet there, but whenever it should be encountering a print statement, we should be getting all the data. So here you see that we are asking for a particular object of the query set. So we are asking for the sixth object in the query set. So when we are doing this, does it mean that all of the data, all of the objects in the query set gets filled? No, it does not get filled. Only this, you're asking only for the sixth object, right? So what Django does is, it's smart enough to identify what you're asking and to just provide you with only what you're asking. So it just gives you the sixth query set and it does not give you anything more. So it does not give you the first object, second object, nothing. So only the sixth one. So when you use that query set object again, it is not going to make another query because it's already stored in the query set cache. So that's the first code snippet. That's what it is telling you. So right. Second one is, okay, so what does the second one do now? So you see that the second statement here is a new statement, right? So we are iterating through the query set. Now the entire query set is cached into the query set variable. Now all of since all of it is already cached, whatever, it doesn't matter which object you call, it's already there and it gives you the object and the data, the object's data, right? So we were talking about using explain, right? So what explain does is essentially it will tell you what the query set is doing, how much it costs you and all that. So this is a little bit of a detailed expression of that. So here you are seeing that the same things we saw, the cost involving that, and how many rows it actually had to iterate through to find the object, and then the actual time that this operation cost for the database to give you back this information. Now, and yeah, the query set. So this is the whole thing, right? So when you see this, you get a idea of what the performance of a query set is. Immediately, if I do this, right, what will I do next? I will try to do some things different so that I can get a better score, better optimization with respect to my query. Okay, so now we understood what we saw what query sets are, what we understood how query sets work, and what are the things that are happening. Some of the niche things like Django giving the object only when we ask for it, and all of that. Now let's see how to optimize it, and we'll see how Django does it in the Django. Right. So first thing first, indexing is the most common way to optimize our databases. So irrespective of the framework, all the frameworks offer you indexing, and all the databases as well. SQL databases out of the box gives you indexing. So anything that you're going to frequently require or query on, for example, whatever comes after your where clause, right? That should always be indexed. So when you're coming into Django, these filter operations, exclude or order by, all of these operations will have the query sets run upon a particular where clause. So whenever you're using this, just remember whatever you're filtering by or all of that, you'll need to index those fields. You'll need to index those columns. The performance difference is massive. Yeah, that is one of the main things, one of the simplest and obvious things that you can do. Second thing, so many of us, right, when we are developing APIs, we just tend to get the data from the database and then do whatever we want later. So for example, if I need to probably find the author of find the books of a particular author, I mean, what do good coders do? They use dot filter, right? Some people that are still new, they will just get all the objects and then use Python to just get the books of that particular author and then perform the business logic. So just don't do the second way. Just use the first way. Always know what you're looking for, and when you know what it is, just use whatever that Python is giving you to facilitate the same, right? So that's the gist of it. So there are a number of things that you can do. So first thing is pretty obvious. Use filter and exclude. The most commonly used database ORM functions. So you filter based on what you need. Exclude the info. I mean, exclude is the opposite of filter, right? You can just leave out things that you don't need. So second thing is F expressions. So F expressions are you can perform operations based on the field itself without pulling that particular object into the memory of Python. So we'll explore more on this in a later slide. So just remember that F expression is also another way in which you'll be able to use work with the database a little better and not use Python for it. So next one is simple thing, use annotate to aggregate in the database. So so this is one of the examples, right? So what do we usually do if I am not aware of all of these things? Okay, so here what is happening over here? So we are in this code snippet, we are looking at getting the aggregate average price of all the books across all the books, right? So if I am a beginner, what I'll do is I'll just get all the books. I will iterate through my query set to find out all the averages and then give the result. So that's a solution, but that's not a very good solution, right? Okay, so instead, what can databases offer out of the box? How do you do it in just one SQL query? So you are all aware of the average function, average and aggregate functions. So not functions, but aggregate functionality in those databases, right? So similarly, you can just use the function that you're getting out of the box from the Django ORM itself. So you can just use book.objects.aggregate average of prices. So you'll just get the average. You don't have to bring it into Python and find the aggregate and do all of that. Instead, just use this, you get the average. So Yeah, that saves you a lot of SQL queries and all that. So sometimes we perform some complex operations, right? So essentially, we might have to go into models. One model, there's a foreign key. Go into that based on some condition. Go into that. Go into that. So there might be a nested path for a particular data that we need to retrieve. So over there, maybe okay, when you're performing it with ORMs, probably you will just have to, get all of those objects one by one. So sometimes it's not very efficient. So when you know you can get it done with just plain SQL, then just go for it. Use the raw SQL functionality and put in your SQL table, and that's sometimes the best way to go about it. Right. So these are the four things that we can do, other than indexing and all that. Those things that we talked before, things that we don't have to essentially use Python to do. Instead, we can just have a database do our jobs. So getting into F expressions a little more deeper. So F expressions. Okay. So what happens here is, so let's say, okay, there's a code example on the right side. So normally. So this code snippet is for a reporter filling in their stories, right? So if I fill in one story, the count has to get incremented. So we're just doing the same. It's pretty regular code. Dot get name, from name is Tintin, and then you increment the count and save it. So what is happening behind the scenes? So now you are getting that particular object into Python memory, incrementing that object, and then saving it. So when you use F expressions, you're saying that, okay, you are having a field called stories field. Now increment it with a with one plus one, right? So so we have to remember what query sets do, right? So query sets are evaluated only when they're asked for it. Now when we are asking for the when we are saving that particular query set does not have anything until this point. It goes back, gets the name, adds one, and leaves it there itself. So with essentially one operation, you're finishing the whole thing. You're not even pulling it back to the Python's memory. Instead, you're just working with the database. So that's how F expressions are useful. Whenever it's a small operation that you can perform with a database query itself, then just use F expressions. It's going to be quite optimized. Right. Next thing is retrieving objects. So when we are retrieving individual objects, there are number of things that can happen, right? So first thing, okay, so we can either retrieve one object with an ID, or we can say maybe there's a string and then just give me everything that matches with it, or give me something that matches with this particular starting of the string. So that's the example that we have over here. So the first one example is pretty straightforward. So we're just asking whatever the object's ID is 10, just give me that object. So here, why is it why is it very quick? Because ID is by default indexed in Django. So when you're querying something by ID, it's going to be super quick. Now, next thing is going with, okay, so doing something like this, headline equal to news item title, right? So this cannot be unique. There is nothing making it to be unique. So there can be another object called news item title. So you can potentially retrieve multiple objects as well. So this is not very efficient because it's going to have multiple matches, and it's not going to be unique in any way. So it is no possible way that it can be indexed. So no indexing and multiple matches, really bad. Next thing is we are using headline starts with. So when we are saying starts with news, there can be so many records that are being retrieved, and this is no way indexed, and it's going to be really slow, and it's highly not recommended. Just don't use this. Always try to get your indexed fields, or try to work with your indexed fields. If not, only in necessary cases, try to limit it with maybe a string comparison. Don't ever have a variable kind of a thing, like regular expressions, like start with news, ends with something. Don't do that. Use your Python to do that. That's more better. Okay, so next thing is okay. So okay, so what happens generally when we are developing business logic? So there is usually one model that we query, and based on that we'll have to query another model with its foreign key, and then use that information to complete our business logic. So so this will be two separate queries, right? You are fetching the model using the foreign key, fetch another set of information. So whatever the set of information that you already know that you want to retrieve, if you already know it, then you can use things like what is this select related to fetch it at once. So for example, what is happening over here is, so the first example is a pretty standard lookup. So when you're getting an object by its ID, and then you're using that to retrieve a foreign keys object. So blog is a foreign key to entry. So there will be a second statement, SQL query that is getting fired to get you the entire object of blog. So this is two queries. So how can you optimize this to just one, right? So that is where select related really helps you in doing this with just one query. So so when you mention, okay, so what is happening in the second code snippet? So we are saying select related of blog dot get id equal to 5. So when you're saying select related of blog, we are essentially saying that I'm going to require this also. Use this uh, use the blog foreign key for this Swift ID 5 object, and retrieve that object as well. So that that object as well. Now there is no two queries that is getting fired. Only with one query, you already have things that you require. So this is pretty useful. I think guys can use this pretty frequently. So next thing is okay, for one of the foreign keys it's fine. So what happens if you have many to many relationships, and you have a complex mapping of models with foreign keys and all that. So that is where prefetch comes in handy. So what prefetch does is so let's go with an example. Just telling it in theory kind of makes it a little complex than it's supposed to. So we have a simple example of a topping and a pizza. A pizza will obviously have many toppings, and many toppings can be a part of pizza, right? So it's a many to many relationship with each other. Now, when you want to get all the objects of pizza, okay, so what is happening before that? So when we are making this a string, we are saying that for all the toppings that exist for this pizza, attach that as well. So we are essentially, for every pizza that we want to retrieve, we are going into the toppings table, and we are fetching all the toppings, and then we are just showing that this is the pizza with all these toppings. Now um, now so this is a this is a foreign key lookup, right? So how can we make this better? So instead of having this as a double query process, we can just make it single query by using prefetch related. So what prefetch related does is, for all the related items with that particular model, it just goes ahead and makes the query for that. It fetches everything at once, and then it keeps it in the memory. Now you can right away start using those things for whatever business logic you require. So that's about prefetch. Right. So when we are querying objects, we tend to retrieve everything and then start working with it, right? So it's not required. Just retrieve the things that you need. Otherwise, you're simply making the database operation costlier. So when you are retrieving only things that you need, it's a optimized way, right? Obviously. So how do we do that? So just use dot values. And you mentioned these are the the data columns that I require. Leave out the rest, right? Okay. Right. And then next thing is differ. So you can leave out some of the columns that you don't need. So actually, when you're working with a lot of data, we're going to have a lot of things like timestamps and all those things. It's not really required for you to have them in your memory. You can just leave them out. That'll be a much better code. So yeah, only is also an option. Differ and only is you just retrieve one field, this particular one. Yeah, differ, right? Um, right. So the next part is, so many a times we check if the object, if this particular data exists in this particular uh, query set. So don't go ahead and compare the object because that will lead to a query set evaluation. Just don't do that. Instead, use contains. Database will itself tell you whether this object exists or not. So you're not wasting your database read operation to find out to get all the list of the objects and then compare it and all that. You're not doing that. So this is a much better way to do that. And also use okay, I'm so sorry. Yeah. So use QuerySet.count. So don't do length of QuerySet. That's a really bad way to do it. But it's fine if you have already used that QuerySet before. But if it's a QuerySet, if the QuerySet is not yet evaluated, then use .count. Right? Does it make sense? Yeah. So next thing is use QuerySet.exists. Don't use if something if of object. Don't do that. When you do that, you are again getting the query set running, right? Query set evaluation running. Just don't do that. Instead, use .exists. Database will tell you exists or not. Next thing, so many a times I've seen, I mean, even pretty advanced level coders do this, but don't but just try not to do it. See, whenever you're using foreign key values, right, you don't need the foreign object itself. You just need the key value. So when you're just using the value, just use your underscore ID. So when you do that, it will just give you the value of that particular foreign key. Instead, when you're using .id, what it will do is it will fetch the entire blog object, tell you the ID from there. So that's an unnecessary operation. Please avoid that. Right. So now, okay. So this topic had to be bulk methods. So right. So okay. So when we're creating objects, right? So many times we'll have to create multiple objects. So what do we usually do? We put it in a for loop, and then we say objects.create so and so. That's a very bad way to do it. Please don't do it, because each and every time you do that, that's a query getting fired, right? Instead, use bulk operations. So bulk create will create all of the objects that you require at once. It will just be one query instead of you for looping through everything. You can just do it at once. This is a highly this will optimize your day-to-day database access very well. Right. The same way how we can create in bulk, the same way we can update in bulk. So in the first example, you see that we're updating a particular field and then we're saving it, and then we're doing that twice. Instead, go ahead and update it, but just bulk update it. Use .bulk update of entries so that you're updating the things that you require just at once. Similarly, insert, very straightforward, the same, the concept. Instead of doing it one by one, just do it at once. Same one with remove as well. So whenever you're deleting stuff, removing, don't remove individually, just use the bulk method. Right. So yeah, optimization is a big deal. So yeah, yeah, that's it. What else? I'm done. Thank you.